And as Jesus sat at dinner in the house, many tax collectors and sinners came and were sitting with him and his disciples. When the Pharisees saw this, they said to his disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" But when he heard this, he said, "Those who are well have not need of a physician, but those who are sick. Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. For I have come to call not the righteous, but sinners." And as Jesus sat at dinner in the house, this is one of two setup statements. Doesn't seem like there's a lot going on, except it's giving us a context in order to hear this with a certain group of people. But here to begin, we just know that what Jesus is doing is sitting, and he's at dinner, and he's in a house. Simple as that. Many tax collectors and sinners came and were sitting with him and his disciples. So here's the second part of the setup statement, and this gets really important. Because what Jesus is going to teach us today is not said in a vacuum. It's not just something that Jesus said out of the blue. He said it within a specific context. And the context in which Jesus said this is with a group of people that the text describes as tax collectors and sinners. Now, we can deduce all kinds of things about the meaning of that, but let me just tell you about a little quirk of the Greek language. Anytime you have a group of people and then an "and" statement, it's usually for emphasis. Think about after the resurrection, whenever it says, "Go tell the disciples and Peter." Well, is Peter not one of the disciples? Well, of course he is. I think kind of the same thing is going on here. Tax collectors and sinners may be a way of describing the tax collectors as the ultimate sinners. And that's not much of a stretch when you know a little bit about Jerusalem during the time of Jesus. The tax collectors were Israelites working for Rome. They sold out to the bad guys, and they were absolutely, positively despised above all other sinners. And so think about what the text may be telling us, and I think this is a pretty good guess. Jesus is at the monthly tax collectors meeting. Jesus is with what appears to be a large group of what the religious establishment, and we'll see this in a minute, considers to be the worst of the worst people on the face of the earth. When the Pharisees saw this, the Pharisees, definitely one of the bigger parts of the religious establishment in Jerusalem during the time of Jesus, in and around Jerusalem throughout what would be considered now Judah and Israel. They were the ones, and I think that the text is showing us this, that were always watching. They were always looking for people to mess up. At least that's the way it seems from the text. They were the ones who were watching to make sure everybody stayed in line. And the minute someone got out of line, according to their standards, they pounced. And that's what's happening in this passage. Jesus is at dinner in a house with tax collectors, bad sinners, and the Pharisees catch him. They said to his disciples, this one just irritates the fire out of me, because instead of going up to Jesus, the one that they are supposedly catching in the wrong, they don't talk to Jesus, but they talk to his friends. They are indirect, passive-aggressive. This is a perfect model for how not to do church. This is a perfect model for how not to do being the people of God. They catch Jesus, supposedly, by their standards, doing something wrong. And what do? They start triangling in other people. Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners? This is the ultimate question. Not why is he hanging out with them? Not why is he associating with them? Why is he eating? Because eating back then, and a lot of ways now, is a very intimate thing. It's something where we share life together. It's familiar. We're in someone's home, and that's where Jesus is right now. He's in someone's home, probably one of the tax collectors. And the Pharisees have a problem, not just with Jesus talking to them, which he probably is not supposed to be doing anyway, but that he is so familiar with them. He's eating with them. And that's what they ask the disciples. Why is the person you are following around, who is supposed to be a rabbi, eating with these horrible people? But when Jesus heard this, he said, Jesus somehow overheard the conversation. He overheard what the Pharisees were saying, accusing him of, however you want to look at it. And Jesus acted out of wisdom. You know the old wisdom saying from Ecclesiastes 3, the long poem? And a part of that poem is, there is a time to speak and a time to keep silent. There may be times when it's time to keep silent. Just ignore these kinds of scenarios, but this wasn't one of those times. This was time for Jesus to speak. And I think it really says something about the religious establishment at Jesus' time. They were not listening to Jesus. They were accusing him, they were trying to control him, and they were trying to keep him out of the way. But Jesus, on the other hand, was listening. He was listening even to his accusers, and he was responding to them, and even trying to show them the way as gently as he possibly could. I think there's a lesson for us deep in this story, because one of the problems we are facing right now, and however you want to characterize it, for our purposes, let's just say the United States. One of the things that we are facing right now that has gotten us in so much hot water is we don't listen to each other anymore. We're not listening. We are talking about each other, which is exactly what the Pharisees are doing in this passage. They're talking about Jesus, but they're not listening. They're not having a conversation. They're not working with each other. Those who are well have not need of a physician, but those who are sick. We could infer a lot of things about what Jesus is saying in this statement. But if we just take it at surface level, if we don't try to wonder, well, is he talking about the Pharisees? Is he talking about the tax collectors? Is he talking about us? If we just take it at surface level, who needs a doctor? The sick. Those who are looking to get well. Those who are looking for ways to get their life regulated, straightened out. Who needs a doctor? Those who are sick. And there are times in our lives when we need a doctor. We need help. And Jesus, the great physician, I think is making an offer here. Go and learn. If you've been listening to me preach for a while, you already know what I'm going to say, because I've said it 100 times, and I'll probably say it at least 1,000 more. This is the first Great Commission. The commission at the end of Matthew is go into the world, make disciples. Go and make disciples. This one is go and learn. The Enlightenment has done us no favors on this one, because we think that what learning is intellectual capacity, gathering knowledge. That was not the case during the time of Jesus, and it certainly wasn't the case for the Greek philosophers. To learn something would mean to bring in knowledge in order to live. I think that's what Jesus is saying here. Go and learn what this means. Learn something, but start working on it. Put it into practice. Cultivate it. Not just an intellectual nod to a belief, but actual practice. Jesus says right before this, the sick are the ones who need a doctor. And so if we are going to learn something, it's going to be for ourselves and the way that we interact with others. Go and learn. What this means. As in, go and learn what this means. Now, you probably already know, we actually did read the passage at the beginning of the sermon, but you probably already know what Jesus is going to say. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. But go and learn what this means. Do you know what this means? Have you devoted your entire walk with Jesus, with following Jesus, to spending your life learning what this means? Not just learning as intellect, but learning as practice, and then all the meanings. Every single possible way we could put this into practice as followers of Jesus. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. Jesus isn't the first one to say this, but he does say it. For the Gospel of Matthew, and I don't think this is an overstatement, Jesus frames his entire ministry to the people of Israel and those who overheard through the lens of mercy. That filter informs everything Jesus does and says and invites people to live as they take up whatever it is and follow Jesus. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. The prophets, hundreds of years before Jesus, said this on behalf of God to the people of Israel. I desire mercy. It's not that sacrifice is completely thrown out, but if you are going to live a life of sacrifice, which we're called to, but it has to be informed by mercy. But some of us are not very good at showing mercy. Maybe it's to others, but truth of the matter is, some of us are not very good at showing mercy to ourselves, and some of us are not very good at accepting mercy from other people. So, just for today, maybe something to think about. Are you showing mercy to others? Are you showing mercy to yourself? And are you accepting mercy from other people? For I have come to call not the righteous, but sinners. What is the mission of the church? Why do we, as a group of people, exist as Jesus followers? It's not to maintain an institution. It's not to make sure that we keep everybody in line and everything going just okay. It is to invite people to Jesus. The message of the church has to include inviting people to follow Jesus on the way. It's not that the righteous aren't invited, but we're already here. We're here. We're at the party. We're with Jesus. We're following Jesus, and we're going to mess up. But what Jesus is doing with this passage is He is giving us our purpose. He's giving us our mission. He's giving us our message. And that message is, we invite you to the party. Come join and follow Jesus and get well. Come meet the doctor, because He's going to make your life not easier necessarily, but He's going to do the same thing that He's doing for us in this passage, which is invite us to be well. Invite us to have a message, a purpose, something that makes life worthwhile. If we look at what Jesus is saying throughout this whole passage in context, it is after the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus says things like, with whatever measure you judge, that's how you are going to be judged. That one makes me nervous, and it should make you nervous. But not if we're living lives of mercy. Because what it tells us is, if we are going around sharing mercy with others, that's the amount of mercy that you receive. And I don't think it's transactional necessarily, but I think you get the point. Don't worry about what you're going to eat, drink, and wear. Why? Because Jesus is going to take care of us, because God always has. That's what God does. But next, and what we will hear for the rest of this worship service, and so if you're watching this sermon online, please watch the readings that follow as well into chapter 10. Because what Jesus does with this passage is that He reflects on what He just said in the Sermon on the Mount, and then it informs everything that Jesus is going to say in chapter 10. It's the second big preaching block of Jesus in the Gospel of Matthew. And you know what that preaching block is, especially in chapter 10? It's the mission. It's what Jesus tells His followers right before He sends them out into the world. He is telling them, before you go out into the world and try to show others how to follow me, or at least even invite other people to follow me, before you go out, first go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice, and now I'm going to send you out into the world. But it's not out of context. It's within a context. Jesus, in this passage, and what He is going to say in chapter 10, is sending us out into the world as those who are being made well, those who receive the mercy of God, and who are being sent out to go show mercy. And the good news is, we get to receive that mercy too.